Second session of the campaign. We hit the agreed upon end time. DM wants to keep on going, but one of the player characters needs to leave. I'm the most experienced player and typical DM, so she asks me to run her character. As she's leaving, the DM starts joking that he's going to kill her character as soon as she leaves. 10 minutes later, we get to a fight on a mountain path. She's an archer, so I put her in a defensible position that's behind the front line so that's away from the slope. I declare a readied action to fire her arrow at anything that approaches the group. DM decides the enemy can leap over the frontline fighters, attack her without provoking any opportunity attacks, or letting her use the readied action. On a hit, he declares she flies through the air several spaces and falls off the cliff and dies. DM ends the episode noting that it's not his fault because he's just running by the book and it was a bad dice roll. DM without a shred of irony saying that he's going by the book while violating multiple rules and going out of his way to kill this single player character because she needed to leave at the scheduled end time of the session. How scandalous of her. My first tale was not quite a horror story, so let me provide you all with the one that I think better qualifies. This comes from a D&D 5th edition game that I was in quite a few years back, and it requires some important context for you to fully understand the title and what led to it happening, so let me provide it. Additionally, some details have been lost to time, so some info is missing and replaced with my best guess. Without further ado, I was playing a tiefling monk by the name of Feroci. Feroci had several character traits that were notable, but the most important of them all was that he was a man of very few words. So few words that over the span of the first arc, a full 16 sessions essentially, he only ever spoke maybe 3 or 4 times. His words when he did speak were always polite, softly spoken, and respectful to the person being addressed. There are a few other player characters in the group, so let me give a quick rundown. We have the Water Genasi Sorcerer, played by who we'll call Tess. There was the Kenku Rogue, played by who we'll call Henry. There was the Elf Warlock, played by who we'll call Bob. And finally, come Act 2, the subject of the story, a Dwarven Paladin, played by who we will call Jack. Jack was a later addition because he was a friend of the Dungeon Master, but couldn't join during Act 1 because of personal matters and work matters. From the very beginning of Act 2, Jack seemed determined upon learning of my character, rarely speaking, in order to make him open up more, without consulting myself or the Dungeon Master, and he'd grown frustrated when my character simply didn't verbally respond to any of his dialogues or attempts at conversation. I explained to Jack, out of character, that Feroci was the embodiment of the Quiet One trope, and thus only spoke when he deemed it absolutely necessary. That way, his words held more weight. Jack, unfortunately, saw this less as me trying to talk him out of his goal and more of a challenge to accomplish the goal. I don't remember every instance of his character trying to start a conversation with mine, but I do remember it having a pattern that went something like this. "Someday, huh? Still nothing to say, Hornhead?" I later learned that Jack was complaining to the DM and other player characters about my character not engaging with the group or story, when in truth, my character drove part of the narrative in Act 1. The whole of Act 1 was centered around his home and it having a mysterious plague that needed to be cured, and whilst he didn't talk, his actions clearly displayed that he cared. He helped secure food and medicine for the infected, searched the ruined sewers under the city for the rumored source of the plague, fought cultists who were protecting said source before destroying it. In Act 2, other player characters had some spotlight while my character spent time on the side dealing with the side effects and fallout of his choices in the prior act, but he still dedicated time to helping the party whenever they needed it. When he was told about this fact, he seemed to have backed off, but we'd soon learn he was bottling up his frustration and getting ready to blow. You may be wondering what caused the explosion. It was my character speaking, but not to his paladin. It was to the sorcerer and warlock, who both needed a few comforting words after an intense scene. My character literally only said 4 words, but those 4 words were, "You both did well." It made Jack explode at the table and start cussing me out practically without warning. I can't remember exactly what he said verbatim, but the general gist was that I had it out for him because he wasn't playing a girl. Wait, what? What does that have to do with anything? Anyway, also I ignored him trying to talk all the time for no reason. He wanted everyone to like my character until I ruined everything, and so on and so forth. The dude stormed out, leaving the table stunned and a little afraid, and he never returned. He told the dungeon master that he wouldn't join any game I was in because I was Catholic phobic. What? And unable to play the game right. The campaign continued, and we got another, much more chill player to replace Jack, but even today, we remember the time Jack stormed off because a character trait didn't match up with what he wanted. I'm not gonna lie, guys, silent characters are really hard to pull off, but they can absolutely be done right. This character wasn't refusing to interact with the plot, they just interacted with the plot without words. Is that easy to do? No, I don't think so. It can be really hard to do that as a storytelling device, but this player pulled it off, I think, pretty well from what I can tell, and the other players seemed to like it, so, it seemed to work out. However, we have Jack, a player who for some reason wanted this particular character to speak. Now, of course, he could just be unaware, but the player made him aware by telling him out of character what was going on, and he just didn't listen. Look, if you want your player to be the catalyst for change for another character, you need both players to agree that that's where this character arc is going to go. Clearly, Jack did not care for that mutual agreement thing and decided to go ahead anyway, resulting in this disaster. Why he thought it was because his character wasn't a girl, I have no idea. So when I say ridiculously overpowered, what do I mean by that? The BBEG was a Thanos ripoff who owned a gauntlet with stones set in it. Instead of 5 stones, the BBEG had 9, and each stone gave the BBEG a boost to his dexterity, strength, and constitution. We wouldn't know exactly how much of a boost until after confronting him. Stay tuned, it's ridiculous. My character didn't want to fight BBEG, so the DM had decided that my character's little sister had been kidnapped by the big bad evil guy. The BBEG had never seen my rogue, so I still don't know how he knew I existed, but that's what the DM did for all 3 player characters to force us to go there. We walked into the BBEG's throne room knowing that the gauntlet alone made him too strong for us. I felt like we were being railroaded into a TPK. To our major surprise, the main player character, DM treated him like the protagonist, managed to subdue the BBEG long enough for my rogue to pull off the gauntlet and start running. Please forgive my memory, it has been several years, but my character could run 120 feet if he did nothing in his turn but run, so I was tasked with getting this gauntlet as far away as possible. This was our only way of conceivably winning this fight, and we were fully aware of this. So was the Dungeon Master. So the DM brings in one of his reoccurring NPCs out of nowhere. As stated by the DM, characters are only allowed to teleport once per turn. However, this DM has the NPC, who the DM knows can't catch my rogue by just running after him, move 30 feet, teleport 3 times, 30 feet each, to get in range, then rolls an attack. DM says strength save, I say, this is BS. He allows a dex save. Doesn't matter, the NPC wins. DM claimed I dropped the gauntlet, and by my turn, the BBEG had it back on his arm. This felt so discouraging at the time, like the party's fighting was for nothing, and the fact that we succeeded at catching the BBEG off guard wasn't worth anything. Instead, the whole party was teleported into a pocket dimension, and that was the end of the session. After the session, the DM told everyone over Discord, I totally screwed up that encounter last session. The gems do not need to be activated by hand or verbal command, and when in Celestial Drive, it adds X number to Strength, Dex, and Con, X being equal to half your player level rounded down. So with 9 gems, he could increase those stats by 90 and tear the group apart. Your DM is an idiot. This means that if this level 20 character had only a 10 in each of those stats, then he would have 100 in each while wearing the gauntlet. So when we get to the next session, we start in the pocket dimension. It's set up like a dungeon, and at the end of the dungeon, we find a group of kidnapped NPCs who are trapped in the stones. This is where it gets into Undertale territory because it's our job to convince these kidnapped NPCs to join our side and fight against the BBG, much like you would do in the Flowey fight. This is the railroad solution to beating the BBEG. The DM says that we can do what we want in order to convince them to help us. Some already know the party, but most don't know us. DM tasked me with convincing one of them who didn't know us, and I made it clear that I was not interested in fighting him. I just wanted to talk. Roll great persuasion check, and the DM still makes me fight the kidnapped NPC anyway in order to convince him I'm worthy enough. As a side note, the DM seemed to dislike that my character wasn't the fighting type and had a habit of forcing me to fight even if he said that there was more than one solution. At this point, I was just done trying to play my rogue and was willing to do whatever it takes to finish the quest because I was so frustrated with the game and our DM. We finally finish this section, and it's time to fight the BBEG again. He's in a massive room, and the dude is huge. We roll initiative. BBEG goes first. He attacks with his massive sword, and half the party go down. They're rolling death saves, and the DM laughs. You guys really went down? I took half damage thanks to dodge, and I was nearly dead. Oh, we were full health before we went against the BBEG. We suffered through a couple of rounds where we weren't able to do anything. His armor class was too high because of the dex bonus, and we were barely surviving his attacks, if you count going down and getting healed as survival. Finally, the DM describes how the kidnapped NPCs aid us, and the DM asks us one by one how we want to attack the BBEG. He describes all of this as if it was an anime or a video game where all the characters get one hit against the bad guy before the protagonists get the final blow. Did this guy really do a how do you want to do this as the actual fight? Like, the actual battle, not the final blow? Much engage, so fun. When we finally win, that's the end of the session. I don't think any of us players liked it. I know I told the DM I didn't like it. DM loved it though. He thought it was the greatest thing ever. When we start the next session, we get out of the pocket dimension, and the NPC that chased me via teleporting 3 times is arguing with another plot-driving NPC. This isn't a short argument either. In total, the argument was between 30 to 60 minutes, and the player characters weren't really doing anything. At one point, since one of the player characters wasn't there that session, the DM took control of her knight and had her get involved in the NPC argument. While the DM has these 2 NPCs fighting, the elf player character tries to steal something off the corpse of the big bad evil guy, mainly because he was told he couldn't. And he was annoyed that he was told no even after making rolls that should have succeeded. The elf player character was also sick and tired of our DM railroading us and saying our good rolls weren't good enough. The DM finally relented when he realized just how annoyed we were getting. I left this group after that session. I've been asked by the DM if I wanted to come back twice, and I've adamantly said no. TLDR, in my last 3 sessions in a particular campaign, Big Bad Evil Guy had at least 100 in strength, dexterity, and constitution, making him strong enough to OKO us, and instead of letting the player characters choose their actions, the DM continued to railroad and tell the story at us instead of with us. The reason I typed all this up though is because I've started running a campaign of my own about 2 years ago, and I've been doing more research into high-level enemies as the players have gotten stronger. I was comparing the sort of fights I was running versus the BS that I went through with my first experience with D&D, and I got so angry about it. I'm still new to being a DM, and I know I'm not going to be great at it right away, but I hope I never make my players feel the way I did back then. That kind of self-awareness will certainly help in that regard. As for this Dungeon Master, botching the final battle of your campaign is really crappy. It's the final battle, the big epic moment. It should be the highlight of your game, but it can be hard to pull off for a variety of reasons. My favorite final battle has got to be Matt Mercer's fight with Vecna. That fight was incredible in Critical Role Campaign 1. There's a lot you can learn from it. Now, of course, having a solution, a singular mechanic to beating the BBEG, whether it be putting trammels into Vecna's flesh or convincing some spirits to help you fight against the big bad evil guy, that's okay, as long as you let your players decide what they're going to do with that mechanic. In the final battle of my own campaign, the big bad evil guy was an ascendant version of the demon prince Orcus, and the party needed to destroy the anchors that were tethering him to the mortal plane. Basically, they had to fight a series of final bosses after getting Orcus's health down by certain thresholds. That's how they beat Orcus. But in those fights, the party could do whatever they wanted. The players could create their own epic moments, not get told what epic moments happen around them. That is the key that this Dungeon Master sorely missed. The DM is a nice guy that tries hard to please everyone, but his girlfriend actively wastes our time. The couple have been gaming together for a while. Board games, TTRPGs, online video games, etc. It's never been a game-breaking issue when she loses focus or doesn't take the game seriously, but now that boyfriend is the DM, we've lost all control. To start, the rules don't seem to apply to her anymore. Her level 1 wizard with +0 constitution has 18 hit points. Spell slots, who heard of them, must be infinite, and she re-rolls until someone notices, then adds a random inflated modifier out of nowhere. This is somewhat understandable because her character sheet is entirely empty except for her name. She has zero clue what her character abilities are, what she's carrying, what her spells do. Absolutely oblivious. Every single turn, she just rolls a d20 without saying what she's doing and looks to the DM boyfriend to tell her what she actually did. Now, aside from slowing down the game tremendously, trying to recall modifiers and damage rolls every time, there's actually no excuse since this is not her first rodeo. She's played D&D many times before, rolled her own character the same time as the rest of us, and she has ample time to fill in the blanks. It's like she can't even be bothered. This, in the least, we can deal with. Filling in the blanks with something reasonable on the fly doesn't have to distract from the fun, but what does distract from it is what she's playing. An evil character. Despite having a negative charisma modifier, she attempts to intimidate and threaten everyone, even other player characters. She tests for traps with the NPCs we're protecting and extorts with the lowliest of peasants. She plays like she's already level 20 and is honestly surprised when she fails a DC, which is rarely, by the way. It's obnoxious to have to metagame our characters to find reasons to be in a party with her player character. All of that is par for the course, though. We've all had to deal with obnoxious players once in a while, right? At least we're all there to play the game, right? Wrong. She spends a minority of the time actually at the table. If it's not her turn, she gets up and leaves to go to the bathroom, make food, start small talk with other players, answer the phone, not kidding. She regularly delays the game with tangents, leaving us twiddling our thumbs waiting for her. Then is surprised she missed something and that we have to wait for her. It's honestly unbearable. You might be thinking, we've brought this on ourselves for not saying anything. Not the case! Her own friends have called her out at the table. They say it's rude, say it's disrespectful to her guests, and have pleaded with her to just focus. Mind you, this is not an attention defect. She's perfectly capable. She just would rather be doing anything else, preferably with alcohol. DM has privately apologized for his girlfriend's behavior, but hasn't done anything about it. We just have to live with it, like he does. And we can't play without her because of how much she enjoys playing. Needless to say, we won't be playing anymore. P.S. Everyone's still friends for now, but girlfriend is entirely aware she is the sole reason we don't play D&D anymore. Her response? Oh well, it wasn't a good campaign anyway. Ouch. This is yet another example of DM favoritism. This doesn't just happen with romantic couples, it can happen with close friendships as well. Anytime a DM has a previous relationship with a player, this is possible. Now, of course, I don't think the solution is to ban all players with any relationship to any other player or DM, because I feel that's a bit of an overreaction. I'm going to be honest, guys, there is no easy solution to this, especially if you're a dungeon master with players who you have a previous relationship with. You don't want to be showing favoritism, and oftentimes it's hard to analyze our own behavior as people. I always go through everything I do in a D&D game with a fine comb. Figure out, am I showing favoritism? Am I ignoring certain players? This is really important to think about carefully. Now, of course, you don't want to fall into an imposter syndrome-like mentality because that's not good for anyone in any situation. However, again, it's important to just reflect on yourself as a dungeon master or as a player and make sure that you're not showing favoritism to anyone at the table. That's something that this DM didn't do and something that this player was perfectly happy to take advantage of. So this happened a few years ago. I joined a D&D 5th edition group that I found from a flyer on my college campus. There were 3 players: Creepy Dude, the antagonist of the story, the DM's husband, and myself. Eventually 2 other guys join us, but that's not important for a while. So we're deciding what characters in class we're going to play. Creepy Dude wants to be a bard, husband wants to be a warlock, and I want to play a mystic, an unofficial playtest class that was published in Wizards of the Coast Unearthed Arcana. All spellcasters. Not a great team composition, so I bring this up and volunteer myself to fill the role as a dedicated tanker melee. I had only mentioned this once I was thinking of going mystic, and I didn't mind changing since we were only discussing what we want to play. Creepy Dude will not have it though. He says he can fill the melee role as a bard of valor. I say I might be a fighter or paladin. He says he can tank as a valor bard. I just give up and assume that he really wants to fill the role of frontline melee. Or tank as a valor bard and doesn't want me to steal his thunder. He keeps going on about how he wants to be a bard, but he will be what the team needs, even though I volunteered to fill a role that I thought we needed, and he insisted that I not do it. Few hours later, he says he's going to be a fighter. I point out that I offered to be a fighter, but I thought he really wanted to fill the role as a melee or tank as a bard. He just says that he will be what the group wants. I'm pissed because even though I thought we should have a dedicated fighter, he made it seem like he could fill that role as a bard, and I backed off for his comfort. I don't press the issue further because there have been fights in my previous RPG groups before, and I don't want to start a fight before I even met these guys. So I let it go. That was a mistake. Day of the game. I ask the group for a ride. Creepy Dude offers me a ride. He asks if I want to get food with him before the game, and I say yes, because, I haven't eaten yet. We go to a fast food place and sit down inside because he says he needs to set up his character. Honestly, it felt like a date. He didn't work on his character, although he brought the books in, and he kept asking me stuff about my personal life, what I like to do, what music I liked. I tried to be friendly, but it was weird. Maybe he was just being friendly, and I didn't like it. We go to leave, and it's raining. He insists on walking me to his car under his umbrella, even though the car is like 10 feet away. I tell him no, it's only a short walk, but he persists, and I give in. Okay, we get to the game. We introduce our characters. Husband is playing a funny but extremely dumb and impulsive human warlock, Creepy Dude is playing a dragonborn fighter, and I'm an ASMR mystic. I describe my character as incredibly beautiful and otherworldly, but I wasn't able to find a suitable name for her in time, so I decided she doesn't have an actual name and let the party name her. Creepy Dude pipes in and decides to call her Angel. For an ASMR, very creative. I would also like to add that my character did not look like a typical angel. Her patron was a koaddle and had rainbow feathers growing from her back and hair and patches of iridescent scales. Everyone, except Creepy Dude, seem a little uncomfortable by this name, but I just point out that I asked the party to name her, so if that's what you want to call her, then that's what she'll go by. Later that night, I make an excuse to stay behind and chat with DM and husband. They can both immediately tell that Creepy Dude makes me uncomfortable. DM says she'll keep an eye out for him, and they make sure that he won't give me rides anymore. As the game goes on for weeks, Creepy Dude's character decides to take up the protector role for my character, always watching her and by her side, making sure that she isn't harmed. At any moment, I thought he would tell my character, "Don't worry, my lady, I'll protect you." This relationship and behavior is fine if the players agree upon it beforehand, or if it makes sense in the backstory. My character can blow up guys' heads with a look. She doesn't need this protection. If anyone needs protection, it's our warlock, who constantly gets himself into trouble. Outside of game, I'm incredibly annoyed and regretting my character choice, but the character I'm playing is very passive and sweet, so she won't speak up about it. But she is smart and tries to find forbidden knowledge. One of the new guys who joined tried to give her a hairbrush he found, and she gave it to the warlock since he has much more use of it than her. The warlock was also very happy with it. Then, TPK. I won't go too deep into it, but we transitioned into Curse of Strahd for Halloween, and everyone, except the new guy who played a halfling rogue, died because of the warlock's impulsiveness. I was relieved because I could finally make a different character and not have to take Creepy Dude's patronizing anymore. She was a Vistani trickster cleric/rogue. She was a butch lesbian who was headstrong and didn't take any crap. She was the character I had the most fun playing until I had to leave school for medical reasons. Before we played our new characters, I confronted Creepy Dude through private messages saying how the way he treated me was patronizing, and that I found out Valor Bards are supports for fighters, so using that as an excuse to not let me be a fighter so he can be a fighter made it seem like he didn't want me to be a fighter because, I'm a girl. He didn't respond, but left me alone at the table. I talked with DM and husband later, and they talked about how they noticed Creepy Dude treated me, the only girl at the table besides the DM, completely different from anyone else, and how he was more protective of me despite the fact I didn't really need it, and how husband's character needed it more than me. I feel like I'm going to get a lot of criticism and people defending Creepy Dude. Perhaps the intentions of his actions were innocent, but I truly didn't feel that way, and neither did some people at the table. Also, I found out during another game I was in, he kicked a person's dog. He's an asshole. Little edit. I want to thank everyone who showed me support. I greatly appreciate it. I wasn't perfect in this situation. I know I should have spoken up sooner, and I learned my lesson. I'm in a great Pathfinder group with all guys now, and I've been playing Pokemon Tabletop United with a group online for years. Good for her, that is awesome. It's always good to see a happy ending for these stories where the person ends up finding a good game and a good group and having fun with TTRPGs. It's something that we all want. Now, of course, this sort of thing is not fun. You shouldn't be banning somebody from playing a class just because, you're sexist and terrible. That's obviously bad. But I do think this story illustrates something that I think is growing a lot in TTRPGs, and I see a lot, especially with newer role players. You don't need to confront everything as your character, especially problems that are not in-game problems. This is an out-of-game problem. This guy is not crappy because it's his character. He's crappy because he's crappy. and you need to confront that as yourself. This girl was playing a nervous character. That doesn't mean that she can't confront this issue. Her character shouldn't restrict her from handling this situation. However, I know a lot of people kind of get into that mindset of, I need to handle things as my character because this is a D&D game. We're supposed to do things in character, but not everything needs to be done in character. This is one thing that needs to be handled out of game, because this guy needed to learn a harsh lesson in respect, because he clearly didn't have any for this OP, or for dogs apparently. Alright, if you enjoyed today's episode of RPG Horror Stories, you want to let me know, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, then you can check out our Tabletop Tavern Tips series, which in a couple weeks is getting a new set because I am moving out, and we are going to be getting a new setup for Crispy's Tavern, so stay tuned for that. While you're there watching Tabletop Tavern Tips, you can subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content right as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down into the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment, "A fighter?" to let me know you made it to the end of the video. In essence, like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.